From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, it's great to be back with you. And how are you today?
It's always great to be here with you, Steve, and I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing well, and it's always a good day when we have some listeners that we can recognize, and we can point to some value that we've provided, and you and as we'll talk about in this episode, and you and I say all the time, we get a lot of good conversation out of AV in the AM, and Steve Ashby and Kid Atkins were talking about device integration and deciphering APIs, and just wanted to point to episode 67. That's a great episode where we talked about what is an API, and we'd love to continue that conversation. So Steve and Kate, if you're interested, let us know, and we can elaborate some more there. And that seems to be an episode that's popular. So going with the AV and the AM theme, you and I had caught wind of conversation about automation. So I thought that would be a good place for us to dive in today and talk about what is considered automation, because that tends to be a buzzword and means different things to different people. So from your perspective, how would you describe automation in the AV programming world?
Uh, to me, automation is taking multiple complex steps and simplifying it down to limited numbers of actions. For example, like in a classroom, if a professor comes in and they need to play a Blu-ray player disc, they come in, they throw in a disc in the player, they turn on the system, and they hit play. Or automation would be they walk in, the system already knows that they're scheduling a movie that day. It turns on the system, turns on the player, opens the tray, you put the disc in, and the movie starts playing right away once it fully loads. To me, that's the difference with the automation over just what some people are consider automation of oh, you're using a touch panel or something like that. Automation is, again, taking those multiple steps and simplifying as much as we can.
And I would agree with you there. It's one way of saying that we want to do things with less work, I think, is maybe a good way of looking at automation. And another term we might think of is like a sequence of events. But what you mentioned also made me think of something that is uh, an area that we need to clarify a little bit, because we could also get into the idea of smart automation. So you mentioned about maybe looking at a calendar and being able to know what type of event or meeting or use is coming up, and then preparing the system for that. That is automation, but is that something that is is built in? Is something that we have to we would consider that being like ground level, or is that something that requires other influences and other input?
I wouldn't say ground level, but more requires other input and influence.
So that's also, kind of talking about where we were at the top of the show with APIs and stuff. I think that's where we're tying in different systems, right? And we're getting input, we're getting data, we're getting triggers from outside sources. This is also can be done with a sensor, maybe, where somebody comes into a room and things happen. Um, a lot of people want these systems to be more intelligent, and automation is what is thought of. But what goes into making that work well? Because part of it is that an automation is good, and what you think might be a good sequence of events or a good trigger or a good intelligent steps might be different or might not be applicable to everybody.
Oh, yeah. So that's where I would say we get in difference between automation and smart automation. So automation, as you mentioned, is it's like taking those multi steps and applying it to everyone. So no matter if Steve walks in, if I walk in, my wife walks in, president walks in, the system is going to automate the same way. Now, a smart automation would be, okay, I walked in. Now the system is tailored to my needs and what I'm doing. If Steve walks in, now it's going to tailor to him. If my wife walks in, it's going to be tailored to her, but go down the line. That's where we get into what's called smart automation.
And you know, how how does that um, play into the whole idea of, say, artificial intelligence? Because we have, what you're saying is that we need to differentiate who is coming in, and we provide more of a personalized approach. But then, but all of that to me is still predefined. We're going to say what you want versus what somebody else wants versus what I want, and it needs to identify who that user is, or who is the one that it's catering to, and it then, say, plays that sequence. But when we're talking about artificial intelligence, and I think that's where people get confused between what we're doing right now and what might be possible.
Yeah. So to me, the difference between smart automation and AI is kind of like you just said. If I walked in and I want the volume at 75%, and I like country music, that's I walk in always gonna be that way. Um, if you walk in, say yours is at 50% and you're a jazz listener, it's going to play that. Again, it's smart towards who the user is, but predefined variables. Now, AI is, say, before I walked into that room, somewhere else, I was, let's say I started listening to jazz somewhere else. Now that room is seeing all my inner connections. And I walk in that room and goes, well, maybe he's in the mood for jazz today, and starts playing jazz. Uh, or even we look at some of these platforms out there like Spotify or any of these other ones out there where, okay, you're listening to this song, you got to enter your playlist. Here's the other songs you might like that you have no clue about. I've actually found many songs I like and bands I like from that feature. To me, that is getting into the surface of AI. I think AI can do a lot more than that, but that's getting into the surface of it.
Because I think what you just said is really important. So it's kind of learned behavior. It's not necessarily saying what we should program, because we, in the first group of automation and sequences, we can get to be very personalized, but it's still preset, just to some degree. Um, but when we're talking about using AI or artificial intelligence, we're talking about somebody coming in using the system, and then the next time they go to use it, their preferences are recalled in some regard. And to me, that's an ideal case, and we all want to get there. I personally have not seen that level of implementation being done in AV, and maybe we want to get there. Maybe it is possible, but we really have to be thinking about things a little bit differently, and expectations need to be set that a lot goes into doing something like that versus just doing um, automation where you're gathering information on the users, and giving them the right sequence of events that you anticipate them needing.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think I haven't seen it in AV world yet. Again, listeners, if Steve and I are incorrect, let us know. Comment. I'm trying to think, is how can we do that? Like, especially with the AI. And now smart automation, we can do that. That's not a problem because a lot of those variables are already defined for us. But how we can incorporate AI into, a mall experience or into a classroom experience, I think becomes more challenging because once you get to AI, I'm feeling is you are losing control, but we like to keep in control because AI, you're allowing the system to be in control. Um, but especially in AV, we want to be in control. We want to make sure the system is reliable and functional and doing what our users want to do. So we want to be predictable. AI is not fully predictable because it's going to be learned. It's going to adapt as it goes on. So I think that's where is how can we get the AI to a point that we're comfortable enough that it's predictable. And I just think we're going to get there, but it's going to take some time.
So, if we walk through the scenario, like, people paint the picture, as you mentioned about, you come into the room and the meeting starts for you, and you sit down and plug in your laptop and your screen, and it goes up on the screen, and you don't have to interact with the technology because it's happening for you. Um, that's the scenario that a lot of companies, manufacturers, salespeople, marketers want to paint, and that programmers have to deliver. In your mind, is this realistic, and is it something that the users really will be happy with?
Is it realistic? Yes. Do I think we have a talent in AV to do things like that? Yes. I really do believe we do. Is it something we can roll out with our users? I don't think so. Right now, I really find it hard to believe that our users are comfortable fully with our systems. I mean, I even see conversations on AV and AM where we're talking about, oh, we got to provide training to our users. So that is not even getting into automation. We got to give them training on the technology. They're not going to trust the technology and get into the true AI and allow the system to do what it needs to do. Now, granted, we're all walking around our devices on us, but we trust those. We know them and we're comfortable with them, but we're not comfortable with a room environment. I don't know how many times I've seen a faculty member come into a classroom and they can use a tablet and a smartphone, no problem. But then they sit there and stare at the touchscreen. I don't know what to do. It's the same thing as your phone. Like, but it's technology. It scares me. But so is your phone. So I don't think we have gotten to that comfort level of though, like, your vehicle and your phone and your tablets and the things that us regular society is comfortable with to trust to go, okay, I'm going to allow that device to do what it's doing. I'm going to trust it, even though we shouldn't always trust technology. But the second we take that same concept, and put it into a boardroom or put it into a classroom or put it into a mall experience, it's like, whoa, I want to step back. I don't trust you yet.
That's interesting to say that, because I often say that when something isn't predictable, when somebody goes to press a button and they don't know what it should do, that's when you have problems, because that's when somebody's going to get scared, because if they don't know what it should do, then it's not going to do what they expect it to do, because they don't know what it was should have done to begin with. So that's where sequencing and automation and some um, of the intelligent systems will can be intimidating. Whereas I guess maybe in at home in a personal life, because we tend to really look at this in a more of a commercial education, um, corporate business setting. Personal side, maybe people will be more comfortable because it's their home and they're used to it, and they're not in front of other people. doing something that they were going to be embarrassed or something bad could happen. So I don't know if there's a difference there, but it,
I think you hit it right there. Is like, for example, if my personal phone is not working, the only person who truly knows is me. Until, you tell people, yo, my phone's not working and something like that. It's not like I'm hitting my phone and there's 30 students looking at me and my phone's not working. Like, so that risk, that failure, looking the egg on your face is very um less on personal devices. Because again, if you walk in, my phone's not working, okay, no biggie. I can accept that behavior to a point. A lot of these people, a lot of society can't. But to a point, we can accept failure on our personal device, but we won't accept the same level of failure on our work environment or our work devices. Like that needs to work. I got to do my job. I got my boss looking at me. Well, technology fails. We know that, and it still goes to my whole thing of people scared of technology. I still would love when I would have a user call me and be like, "Oh, system's not working. There's an error on the screen." I'd be like, "Okay, what does the error say?" I don't know. I don't know computers. You can't read? Like that's I'm not asking you to tell me technical stuff. I'm asking you to read me what's on the screen.
I find that hard to believe these days. I don't know very many people. I mean, I'm sure it's a generational thing, but I don't know very many people in um, younger generations that that can get away with saying I don't know computers. I don't think that you can get through life that way.
I do think we, in a way, yes, in a way, no. I think we do chop up the younger generation as being more tech savvy than I think they really are. I do. Karen, my kids are growing up with technology. They're using their tablets and all that stuff without a problem. But like for example, right now, my daughter just picked her classes for school that starts next week. She has a computer class and she has no clue what's going to be. And she's like, I don't know. Like, she's kind of nervous about going to this class. And then, Grant, I don't know what the class is going to be either. And at least we're going to have these resources that I can help her. But still, it's like, yeah, I don't know if these people, this generation really understands technology to the root, but they're comfortable with technology, which I think is different. They're comfortable with technology around them, but understanding technology is different.
I like that actually, and I think maybe that should be a future conversation that we have is um, it's understanding versus being comfortable with technology. I think it's a really good point, and I think
Yeah.
that's something that we could relate to EV. So be on the lookout for a future conversation about that. Before we wrap up, is there something that we can do to um, enhance our enhance the user's comfort level, I guess, with automation and like one thing that I think of is that we can't only have an automation. You need to have some other means to be able to operate a system. A purely automated system to me is asking for trouble. What's your thought about that?
I agree with that. And I'm on the same notion. I've even told my student workers and my team members, I go, our number one job is to make sure classes go off. That means if a control system is not turning on display or routing video to that display, and I need to run a cable across the floor to the display to get them up and running, we're going to do that the old school way, but then we will come back and fix it. But we need to have that option. Now, if there is no way of turning that display on because you need that system to uh, do it, and that's the only way you do it, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Because what are you going to do? You're going to tell the clock, "Oh, sorry, I can't turn on your display now." That 3 grand that we were talking about last episode. Just go home. You throw it out the window because you can't do anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a couple of things, and if anybody wants to talk more about it, that I'd recommend with automation. One is having at least a page like I think you're talking about of backup controls, something, even if it's just for a technician to be able to get in and say, I need to override. And then the second is being able to adjust automation, uh, because you never know, if you hard code something purely and it's only going to work one way, but being able to make some adjustments to it, um, in real time, is, I think, a really good value and a good way to be able to, um, make the automation more dialed in. So, and that's something that we could talk about in a future episode. But hope everyone listening is able to relate to this in some way. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Is automation, what value does it provide, and what impact does it have on AV programming? James, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you're up to, and read some of your content?
As always, you can find me on Twitter, AV_James King. That's where I'm most active. I'm on LinkedIn, trying to get a little more active there, as well as I write for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, the IT and AV column that comes out monthly. HEPMA member. So you Google me, you'll find me.
So let's everybody all reach out and connect with James so he can get more followers or connections on LinkedIn. Um, for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media, Twitter and LinkedIn, mostly on Sundays, Twitter, as we talk about on AV and AM, but I try to tune in on other days when I can. As far as content, AV Network, Commercial Integrator, my company blog, controlconcepts.net, and also a state of control on avnation.tv. And but we definitely want to hear from you. We're on several platforms, YouTube, Apple and Google Podcasts. If there's others that we're missing, let us know. Please share an episode, leave a comment, rating, review. It would mean a lot to us. So please do so. And we also want to continue to offer up those topics and answer those questions that the community has. So with that, this has been Ask the Programmer.